In today's video, I'm going to show you how to sew on some beads and sequins. So I'm going to show you some seed beads first. And to sew on beads, you just want to use some ordinary sewing cotton. And the really key thing is the size of needle that you use. So I'm using a sharp sewing needle, and it's got a very small eye. And the reason for that is to make sure that my beads pass over the sewing needle eye without getting stuck. I'm also just going to knot my thread to make it easy to show you how to sew on these beads. And what I've got here is I've got a piece of beading mat and I've got my size 10 seed beads. And so to start with, just bring your needle up from the back of the fabric. The bead mat stops the beads from rolling about while you're sewing, and actually just means that you can pick your bead up by putting your needle through the bead straight into the mat, and so it just makes it a little bit easier. And then you're going to want to bring your needle back down into the fabric, literally the width of the bead. And so once you've stitched your bead on, you can't see the thread, and then you just bring your needle up in the same way. And if you're working with particularly fine beads, you're better off doing this like back stitch. So I'm actually going to come up a little way apart from my first bead, and then I'm going to go back on myself like this. And so this works no matter what the size of bead you're stitching. So I'm just going to show you some bugle beads as well. So bugle beads are long beads. And again, you can do this in exactly the same way. So bring your needle out and then pick up your bugle bead. And then this time, because it's a long, thin, tubular bead, then actually the distance you're going to want to put it back in is a little bit further apart than if it was a seed bead. But you can see it's exactly the same approach. And then you just want to pull that so it lies flat. And so that is how you would sew on a seed bead and how you would sew on a bugle bead. And then I'm going to show you sequins next. So sequins I've got in a few different sizes and shapes, and there are actually two main techniques that you can use to sew these on. So first of all, I'm going to bring my needle up and I'm going to show you how to sew on a sequin by anchoring it with a bead. So if you take one of your sequins and thread that on first, and then you're going to thread on a bead onto your needle on top, and then you're going to go straight back down the same hole in the center of your sequin. And what that does is that anchors the sequin onto your fabric and you see the bead in the middle. So let me just show you that again. I'm going to use a slightly larger sequin this time. And if you're using really large sequins, you might need to use a larger sized bead as well. But there we go, you can see how that works, and you can see how you can play about with the different colours to get a different effect there as well. And let's just show you one final one like this. So that is a star-shaped sequin. And again, bead and back down the same hole. So that's how to sew on a sequin by anchoring it with a bead. I'm just going to fasten off because the other way of sewing on a sequin is using embroidery thread. And if you use embroidery thread, then you can make a couple of anchoring stitches that will then show on the front of your sequin. So for this, I'm going to switch to using an embroidery needle. This is embroidery needle in size 5. And then for this, you can really play with the threads and the colours that you use. So I'm going to start off with a gold embroidery thread. This is actually a gold metallic embroidery thread, and I'm just using one strand here. And so if you bring your needle up again in the center of your sequin, and then thread your sequin onto your needle. So I'm going to show you the star sequin here. And then you want to make a stitch out from the center of your sequin to the edge of your sequin. So the star is a nice example to start with because you can do this round each point of the star, and then you bring your needle back up in the center and just work your way round so that your sequin stays anchored to your fabric. So for a 5-pointed star, I'm going to make 5 stitches between each point. And you can see that has nicely anchored that sequin to the fabric. And then I'll just show you the same thing with a round sequin. So I'm going to use the red. I've still got my gold thread, so you'll see this creates a stronger contrast between the stitching and the sequin. And this is a 6mm sequin, and so I'm actually probably only going to do 3 stitches. And if you equally space those stitches, that will keep your sequin anchored nicely to your fabric. And there we go. And I'll just show you one final one with the silver sequin. So the silver sequin is actually an 8mm sequin. And so for this I will use 5 stitches again. I do recommend an odd number of stitches because it just gives a better finish. But really you can do as many as you like. And then I'm just going to fasten my thread off again so that that doesn't come undone. And so you can see that is how to sew on any beads, but I've shown you a seed bead and some bugle beads today. That's how to sew on a sequin, anchoring it with a bead in the center. And that is how to sew on sequins using embroidery thread with the stitches that are visible on top. Hope you found that useful. Do like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you next time.